Thank you. And thanks for having me again. This will be a packed session, and I might even have more stuff to show you than I actually have time. So let's see on the fly if things go. Please feel free to comment. I have the comments open on my next screen. But first thing I have to talk to you about this thing. Like, who recognizes this? You don't have to answer, but just look at it. This is King's Cross and London. This is the central station, and obviously this is mimicked through the Harry Potter entrance, right? Right, platform 9 3/4. It's not yet there. It's normally it's not obvious, but if you think about it, if in the movie, if I'm running to that specific place with that a specific force at a specific time, I'm able to get in and to get into a whole new world, which is amazing if we talk about, let's say, a movie like Harry Potter. But if you think about our applications, it is pretty much the same. Like from the outside, most of our applications look a-okay. It's fine. Looks good on my machine. Ship it. You know that phrase, right? But if you hit on the right spot with the right amount of force, with the right technique at the right time, you might be able to get into something. You might be able to create something, to delete something, or even do worse. And that is in most cases what security is to developers. And that's why we're going to look at how we develop applications. So because if, say, I develop an application, I've been an engineer for decades, I would almost say, but I'm not that old. But I've been a Java developer for at least 15 years. That's how far my memory goes. Anyway, you know that when you are developing a thing, you start with something like a proof of concept, a nice POC that is exactly made for purpose, exactly what it should be, and you show it to your manager. It's like, oh, this looks great. It works. It does exactly what it does within the guardrails that we got. However, you know how it happens in big companies, right? If something is there, a proof of concept or an MVP is never an MVP. It's always there to stay. So when you do this, they come back to you and they say, like, hey, can we add this tiny new feature? And you're like, yeah, sure, maybe not. Anyway, you try it, you do it because, hey, that's what we do. We are creators, we are builders. But when things go good, when things are running, and managers will come up to you, and even top level managers say, like, from a business perspective, it makes sense to add this to your application. And you're like, sure, it does, but it's not what it's built for. This is not what the foundation is looked for. So what you do is you build something on top of something else, which actually is not suitable, but it works. And from a business perspective, this makes sense, right? And we go on and on and on. We build up things, we break things off, we build up on something, other things, and not specifically what the proof of concept or what the initial program was created to do. Actually, the most useful thing would be break it off, rebuild it again, but tell that to your manager. And in the end, if we give on to that, we actually have a application that does everything, talk to the moon, fly helicopters, and all that kind of stuff. But back again to that Harry Potter reference. If you push on that at the right spot with the right amount of force, you know there is technical depth in it. You know that our shortcuts gotten taken. You know that we actually should break it off and build it from the foundation up again. But with the right amount of force, the right amount of time, at the right place, you can get it. I'm Brian. I am a Java champion and a community lead for the Virtual Jug and the Netherlands Java user group. I'm based in the Netherlands. So hi, Holland. Hi, Marit. Great to have a fellow Dutch person on the stream. And I work for Sneak, a developer security company. And why I say developer security company? Because we create tooling for developers. So let's dive into the development stuff. Who have you ever had to interact with a database? I bet it's almost 100% of you, right? At least I think so. Most applications I worked with at banks and insurance companies did have to interact with a database. So you might be able to write SQL or read SQL. Fun question. What do these two statements do? And just dump it in the chat. And I know there's a delay, so I will give you the answer anyway. The first one is basically breaking off a SQL statement. And the second one, the double dashes, is making everything that is next to that a comment. that is interesting because we can do these two things both, to actually break things. So let's get into an application. There's a Java application, and let's run this. And now I noticed that I forgot to turn something off, but we can do that right away. The application is running, and let's first of all turn off my one password, because that will scream at me because I probably don't have good passwords in this thing. Anyway, let's rebuild it. Okay. So the thing that we can do over here is that we can search in our product categories, and that's our coffees and beers, by either name or a description. Let's try these two things. So it's something like this and dash dash, basically saying I'm cutting down a statement and I'm not doing anything. Well, that kind of works, but how does this influence whatever we can do? Well, we are able to do things as this. I am basically cutting down a statement which was already there, and let me enlarge it for you. I'm trying to update every product, giving it a price, and whatever is after that, I'm dashing it. Basically, a SQL injection, and I'm trying to infiltrate into the, how do you call that, the execution path of whatever SQL does. Yes, basically a Bobby tables incoming. Absolutely. So if I do this, I submit. Nothing seems to work right, but if I refresh, you see all prices are 0. Okay, that is basically a SQL injection. Good. So let's get back to whatever we are doing. Like, what is a normal way in Java to prevent a SQL injection? Some people will say, use prepared statements. Other people will say, parameterized queries. Actually, it's both. It is prepared statement with parameterized queries. And it's not either or. Actually, you should use both. And I tell you why. Because if you do one without the other, you might, and here my quote, might still be vulnerable. So say you have code like this. This is just a search pattern, and I am creating a query here. And obviously what I'm doing here is the parameter that is a parameter to this function. I am concatenating that to the SQL query like this. And because the SQL query as a whole normally goes through the database, I can interfere with the execution path by shortcutting it and doing whatever the hell I want. Well, one of the things you can do, obviously, is thinking like, hey, expand my search to one thing, or cut down a query and actually do something different, start up a new query, depending on what kind of interface you have. Okay. Normally, if you can look at your old Java books, they will say like you need to use a prepared statement like this. Like, hey, we use a prepared statement, and then we insert the query, and this query in this case has a wildcard. Well, why do I say prepared statement with parameterized queries? Because if you leave the parameter still in this query and put it in a prepared statement, it does not work, or it still is vulnerable. As a second step, I will give the parameter as a second step to the prepared statement, and then we execute. So what is the difference between just parameterization and a prepared statement? Well, in Java, we have prepared statements, luckily, but not in every language. Let me just explain to you quickly what a prepared statement is. If you have a prepared statement, it's basically a two-step action. First of all, I'm sending the query with the wildcards to the database. So it's already received by the database, and the database is able to create the execution plan from A to Z, but with a few blanks in it. At the second step, I will provide the parameters to the database. So basically two things over the line to the database. And I leave it up to the database to get the ID or get the variable in. Yes? At that point, because we're doing this, the execution plan is already created. So it's virtually impossible to create a parameter as a second step and insert that and influence the execution plan anymore. So that's how you prevent SQL injections. You can do parameterization as you do in JavaScript, for instance. But what happens there is that you do parameterization on the client side, so your application, and you basically escape it or something like that. And then you send one query over to the line, over to the database. And from that point on, you just do it. Okay. So that is prepared statements and parameterized queries. But what about Spring, right? What about I'm using JPA, I'm using CRUD repositories, and I already see it in the comments, and I saw that coming because in this case, I am using a Spring application. I scan my application with the tooling that we have. I'm using obviously my own tooling, and this is an integration within IntelliJ, uh, and it analyzes my open source libraries and my code security. So let's go into code security and let's see whatever is happening there. Let's collapse. Oh, let's expand everything, and I don't want to see the open source problems because I have a ton of them. But it says I have a SQL injection. I have a SQL injection here at line 32 of a specific file, which is my home controller. So, okay, let's go there. And it says search repository Dutch search product. So let's go to the search product. And obviously what you can see here is that I'm specifically doing, and I'm using JPA in this case, that I'm specifically doing trying to be smart because I want to search for both the description and the title, and I'm doing it like this. And this is not the way it should be doing. Now, normally what you should do is, again, you're using JPA. And JPA, depending on the implementation, let me get that straight, because JPA is just a reference, right? So what JPA reference are you using? Or what JPA implementation are you using? In most cases, and by default, I guess, it is Hibernate. Hibernate, under the hood, helps you with doing prepared statements as long as you're doing it the right way. Obviously, I am lazy and I already did that for you. So let's just remove this for a second. Oh, let's do this and cut them out. And I can do something like this and uncomment it. So what I'm doing here is that I'm using these wildcards again, also with Spring, but I want to have a combined query in this case because I don't know. Sometimes I need to be smarter than just the obvious CRUD repositories. So I'm doing this and leaving this to the database and having it here. I'm setting the parameters and I'm turning it out. Does this work? Well, obviously, yes, that does work, but let me show you because in my application.properties, I will show you the SQL that will be sent to the database and I will restart my application. And as the first step in my application when I'm running it, you will see that I'm already inserting users. And you'll see that every time I insert with values this. But also when I'm searching, you will see these kind of things. So Hibernate does use prepared statement under the hood if you use parameterized queries. If you use the CRUD repositories in Spring, it also uses prepared statements under the hood. However, it depends on your implementation of JPA. If you use Hibernate, it's fine. But if you use anything else, because there are multiple ways of doing prepared statements or doing JPA, and CRUD repositories, it depends on the implementation. So you need to be very careful not to saying, I'm using JPA, I'm safe. That is not the case, depending on however you do it, what version you do it, because I don't know if older versions of Hibernate do it, but this is a very kind of a recent version. If I would do this again in my application and try over here, you see all prices are again normal, and I would try to update. It doesn't do anything, and you will see if I refresh it, all prices are back to normal or are still normal because I'm using a prepared statement. The database is taking care of this. You might think, yeah, I can find this. I can. We do code reviews, and we might find this in code reviews, and we will find this. It's fine. But does your junior do? And I can find that. Let's face it, like a lot of people from engineering school or boot camps do not know what SQL injection is. Hopefully nowadays they do, but it would be easy if a tool in your IDE can already help you pinpoint that there might be a problem, and then you can investigate if it is or not. Obviously, if I would refresh this now, the SQL injection will be gone. All right, let's go on to the next thing because SQL injection, we've seen that, we've heard that. Who of you ever did a file upload? And then, I mean, say it's a Spring application, because this is a Spring Boot application. You're having a form, you're trying to upload a file, for instance, a picture to a profile. I think a lot of folks can relate to that, right? So if you upload a picture to a profile, it might look something like this. So let's go back to my application. It is still running, hopefully. Cool. Oh, that is not what I meant to do. I am so sorry. Let's log in, and I'm logging in with user and user because I work at a security company and this is safe. Obviously not, but no, don't. It's fine. I need to change my password. In my profile, I can upload a picture, but let's not do it this way. Let's use something else. Let's use my favorite tool called Burp Suite, Burp Suite Community Edition, and Burp Suite Community Edition. And let's see where it opens on which screen. Probably my other screen. Give me a second. Yes, there it is. And I will just open this. This is a free community edition. I start up. And again, it starts on the other screen, but here we have it. And I'm going to use, no, later, it's fine. I'm going to use the proxy. I will get to that in a second, but I will use the proxy. I am opening a browser that is connected to this proxy, and we will see a new browser, in this case, Chromium, that is connected to the proxy. I will tell you why in a second. So if I'll go again to localhost 8082, I will log in with user, log into that. Let's go to my profile and let's upload a picture. Let's upload Brian 500. Let's upload that. It's uploaded. And let's look in my profile. Now you see there's a picture. Hooray! It worked. Ship it. But wait, there's more, obviously. So I'm using Burp Suite for a reason. But let's first look at the code and let's get back to Burp Suite in a second. Because if I am looking at the problems in my code, it says that I have here on line 35 of my upload controller, I have a vulnerability. And you will see it starts at upload controller line 31 all the way to line 35. So let's take a look at that. This is the code. And basically, what we're doing here, let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's remove that one. Basically, what we see here is that this is just your standard operation, how you upload something from a screen into into your application. This is the file, a multi-part file. But a multi-part file is a parameter. And a parameter is nothing more than the post request of whatever, or the POJO representation of the post request that comes into your system. Okay? What I'm doing here is I'm getting the original file name. I'm using the original file name, and I use that to concatenate both the upload directory, where I think it should be, plus the name, which is the original file name, where I replace spaces by underscores, and I upload it. But what if my file name is something like dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot slash slash etsy slash pass wd? I am not checking for that. I'm just using it. You know that the file name is just a parameter in your post request. And I will show you because I had Burp Suite open somewhere. Got you here. I have my HTTP history. And let's look at this post upload image. Okay. You see that this is the request and this is the response. And I know it's a little small, but I will get to the request in a second because I will send it to my repeater. Okay. If I'm going to my repeater and I will zoom in on it, you will see that here, the red part, so the lower part of that request is just the binary part of the picture. But the upper part is all headers. Like you see over here on the top, you see that's a post request to local 8082, etc., etc. And down here, you see that the file name is basically just a parameter or basically just a header. It's metadata, and I can change that. So what if I change this to dot dot slash IntelliJ rules, because I'm very lead. and try to upload that again. Let's do that. So if I send this request, you will see I will get a response, and this response is a 200 file. And instead of having it in my upload folder, I will now probably have it in the root of my system. So have a look. The first one, it was in my upload folder. That was the Brian 500 I did before. But now you will see that IntelliJ's rules broke out of the upload folder and is now part of my root of my system. Depending on how you work with this and what kind of user you use to run your Java application, you might be able to expand that scope. Think about it. What is the default user for a Docker container? Trick question. Put it in the chat. The thing is, if you're running this as an elevated with an elevated user, I can use this to overload or overwrite other pieces of information by just hijacking an HTTP post request, putting some other binary data in it, and change the way of how you do this. And obviously, well, yes. Now I see in the chat it's root. Like for a Docker container, root is the default container, and you should not run it as root, obviously. But check how many privileges your application has, and if you want to override things. Well, let's see. Is there a solution for this? If I go to my thing again over here, and yes, it has an example file for me. What I can do, for instance, it says to me here, I can use something like file.getCanonicalPath. And if it starts with target directory. So basically check if I traverse all of that, if that starts with a target directory. Another way of doing this is, for instance, to normalize it before you actually create the file. So that what would be great if is something like if, no, not principal is null, if, well, is my file name and path dot normalize, which does the same, but now on the path structure, does start with upload directory. Well, let's say if it's not, oh my god, I need to get used to this new feature in Mac. To upload directory, maybe I want to, I don't know, throw new IO exception or something like that. Nice try, but no cigar. love how some of the GitHub Copilot things are weird. Anyway, what I'm doing now, I'm checking if the normalized path starts with the uploaded path. If that is not the case, then I just drop it. Then I make sure that the upload does not go through. So think about it. These kind of things you might not have caught during code reviews, unless you are pretty aware of that. But hey, who does your code reviews? And how many time do you take for your code reviews? So it would, again, be very, very handy if you have tools like this available that can help you see if these things are going better or not. Yes, there's a comment in that but it would be better not to have the original file name. Absolutely, but in some cases you cannot. If I'm, depending on your use case, I might use the original file name. For instance, I don't know, if people want to store things through my application and they need the original file name, we might need to preserve that. But you need to be aware that the file name is part of the post request, and therefore you need to sanitize that. You need to look at that. So getting back to whatever we were doing in the slides, yeah, pretty much we've seen this, and we've seen that the multipart file is the problem. So what is the actual file name, and where does it traverses to? If I'm using the original file name as part of the path where I'm going through, I need to make sure that it doesn't traverse out of the place where I want it to be. Check where it traversed to. We did that. So you see, this is quite easy to do if you have the right tooling, but it would not be something you probably would catch during development. All right. Who of you, and I know XML is old, but I'm using Maven, so I probably need to do XML, but who does XML parsing? I know it is used still a lot from machine to machine coupling, where we need to, I don't know, integrate with old XML files or old SOAP request or whatsoever. Thing is, XML is still a thing, and we want to use it for business to business couplings or machine to machine couplings in many cases. But did you know that there are things like external entities and doc type definitions? Most of this is a feature within an XML parser to connect, for instance, to a DTD to actually see if the XML that you're getting in is performing a certain standard, is up to specs. Um, However, external entities can be misused. And the thing is, by default, in most Java parsers that are shipped with the Java JDK, this thing is there. So let's check that one out. Obviously, I have an XML parser, and it says to me like, hey, I've got an XML external entity injection. What does that mean? Well, let's go to the parser. My parser is the sex parser from Java. I'm just using the plain sex parser as I used like 10 years ago. It still works. And it does in a very ignorant way. It parses my XML parser. But this is just the default way. I don't set anything. The defaults are this. What can I do with XML? Well, let's cut this down. I don't need Burp Suite anymore. Yes, I want to exit. Yes, I don't need this anymore. So say I am going back to my shop and I'm going to my orders. I can export to XML, which is great. Well, my XML is exported. Let's see if I can show that somewhere on a screen. This is not the right way to export it. Let me show whatever we can do. Let me open it. And this is on my other screen. I am so sorry for that. Let me open this in VS Code, because VS Code is just an editor, right? So you see that this is the way the XML is parsed. And yes, nothing bad. It's an order date, an order line, nothing specific. So we can import that as well. So I can import this, and this works great. But let's get away from this right away. What I can do as well by importing is I can do something nasty. Got an example over here, and we call xxe.xml. And this all looks like pretty normal XML, except for the top. In the top, I'm using a doc type definition, and I'm using external entity. And in this case, this external entity does not point to a DTD or something else that I want to use or include in my system. No, it points to basically etc/passwd on my screen. So what I'm doing here, I bind this to this variable xxe, and that xxe is now here outputted in the product name. So let's see what happens if I upload this thing just by using the normal XML parser as was generated for me. Let's import, choose the file. Nope. Let's go to demo sneak. Don't get burned. Examples, xxe.xml. Open that. This is the one. And if I submit it, you will now see that at part of my products, I have basically the body of my passwd file. And now my passwd file doesn't say that much. But the thing is, it's not what you want. You can now infiltrate or exclude information that is outside the scope of your system. And that is because by default, the Java parsers or the parsers in the JDK, and at least the sex parser, but also the DOM parser, the DOM parser, does not take care of that. You need to specifically set certain defaults or set certain properties to make sure that that doesn't work. So let's go to my back to my parser. And what I need to do, and I said it already here, you see it in the comments, I need to set a feature called disallow doc types. And I need to set a feature external general entities set to false. So by default, we expect to have doc types, and we allow external entities. That is not in every language the same, but in many of the Java parsers, in many of the Java XML parsers on board in JDKs, this is the default because it's actually a feature, but we can misuse the feature. So that means if you are getting XML files from a third party, which can be something like a partner or a system you integrated with, it can be that your system is safe, but because they are doing something, it might influence whatever is happening in your system. You got me? So if from their side you accept that, and normally that's a trusted party, You get that XML, you parse it, and now they have a weird external entity injection in it, and you display things that you might not want to display. Something you should take care of. You should need to take care of, and you should be aware of what kind of defaults are there in your application, and what is your defaults? What are your defaults in your parser, and are they safe, and are they safe enough for you? So the thing is, basically, we need to make sure that the doc types are disallowed. So disallow doc type set to true, which is weird. And external entity, general entity set to false. If I do that, this is not possible anymore, and either it will ignore it, or depending on how you set it, it will actually throw an error, and now you're not vulnerable anymore. But think about this if you still need to do these kind of things. All right, we're about halfway through. Let's skip the next one. The next one is about front end, la di da. I'm sorry. Yes, we did. Let's go to hashing and encryption. Because this is still a thing. We need to make sure that data that is in our application is safe, is secure, and some of the data we might want to encrypt or we might want to hash. And we're talking about storage in this case. I'm not talking about sending a data over the line. No, let's keep it to storage, because that's already difficult enough. The first thing you have to ask yourself, if you need hashing or encryption, because people use the words interchangeably, which is not true. The first thing is, do you need to retrieve your original data? Yes or no? Well, if that is an answer for the specific use case, you can look at it. If it's about no, you don't need to retrieve the data, you need hashing. For instance, a password. Obviously, you do not need to revert the password back to the original state. Hashing is big enough. And basically, when you hash a password twice, you can simply compare the hashes, and if the hashes are correct, it is the same password, right? Just TLDR. So you don't need to retrieve back the password. By the way, if you do this for a system you logged into, I always try to retrieve my password. And if that system gives me the password back, either it stores the plain text or uses not uses hashes anymore. So any person that maintains the database can basically get my passwords, which is not safe. So that's what I'm always trying. Yes, I'm a bit nuts, I know. But think about it. You don't need to do that in your system. First of all, you need to ask yourself, do I need to take care of this myself? Maybe you should choose something like, I don't know, Auth0 or some service to do that. But say you're doing this yourself. What kind of hashing algorithm should we use nowadays? Well, let's say we need to use something that is up to date, right? There are tons of algorithms like PBKDF2, bcrypt, ascrypt, Argon, Argon2, Argon2i, Argon2d, Argon2id. Which is the one that I should use, and which are the ones that are considered nowadays at least safe enough? Well, I didn't make this up myself. I did research. Currently, it's Argon2ID. And not just Argon2ID, Argon2ID with specific parameters. And you can look that up. I wrote a blog post on it, which I will give you access to in a second, or give you the URL to in a second. But this is also backed up by the OWASP Foundation. Argon2ID covers multiple ways of attacking. And the researchers found out, because I'm not a researcher, found out that if you do it like this with at least 15 megs of memory and at least two iterations and at least 1 degree of parallelism, that is considered the minimum way of being safe. Obviously, you can also, if Argon ID is not available, you can go to bcrypt or scrypt, but make sure that the parameters, the default parameters, are at least high enough. Because if it's too low, it's too easy to crack with tools nowadays. But let's get back to our system. And obviously, that's why I wrote the system like this. We might have an issue. Well, let's take a look at where we normally in a Spring Boot application do the hashing of passwords. Well, probably somewhere in the security config. And yes, you see that over here I am using PBKDF2 as a password encoder. Oops. It is not unsafe, but it's not currently the best practice. So I keep up to date. I make sure that I know what I'm doing. So let's basically remove this and let's turn this into something new. Like I can do something new, like new Argon to ID password encoder, and it's just that easy. And these indeed are the defaults. So 1 degree of parallelism, 50 megs of memory, and 2 iterations. So this will be great. All right, let's get to my H2 console, because the H2 console is open. And as you can see now, if I connect to my application and I look at all the persons in my database, you'll see that currently they just have a hash. And this is not an Argon 2 ID hash. But by simply updating this to Argon 2 ID, and what you need to do though is include an Argon 2 or Argon 2 encryption library as well next to Spring, because this is a Spring Boot application. And I did this in this case with, yes, there are a lot of, I did this case with Bouncy Castle. Bouncy Castle is one of the implementations, but Bouncy Castle works with the Spring password encoders, and password encoding is actually a wrong word, but let's not get into that. But by just changing it to a new password encoder, I now instantly, if I refresh this application and do this all again, have a new thing or a new algorithm included. And it's that easy. You just need to be sure that, let's go back to the console. Let's restart the console and now connect. And yes, it is an H2 database, so the people are generated as the first step of the cycle. So these are not the same people. This is just a new set of data, and we now see that over here I am using Argon 2 ID, in this case with 50 megs of memory, degrees of parallelism, and at least the minimum settings that we need to have to. The thing is that if you need to transform, you need to have something in place to make sure that the old one gets out and a new one gets in. Yes, that's true. But you need to be up to date to this. And you need to be aware, like, hey, if I want to do this, if I want to keep passwords, and I like there is PII data, for instance, in my application, you should take care of what is at least the minimal effort that I need to do. So keep researching this and not do this only at development, because you know that the first pass of development is probably on day one, but this application exists for 100 years. So do this eventually, say every once in a while. May be aware that things might change and things might be updated. And yes, it can be challenging if you need to migrate, because then you need to. I basically what you can do if you can migrate, the option is just clear everything and say to people, hey, you need to update your password. Just do it again. Here's a new password. Go ahead, or something like that. That they create the new thing. So you need to be aware of that when you create your application, that people are able to update their passwords, right? But be aware that just not use anything and hey, Argon ID is there, it's fine. Do research. That's what I'm just trying to say. So yes, this thing, and you will see it on the screen. I will publish the slides as well, but I wrote about this, like what is the first pass, what are the minimal requirements, and if that's not possible, if I want to include bcrypt because I cannot include Bouncy Castle, for instance, what are the minimal settings that it needs to be. It's all in there. But this was the no. This was, I do not need to retrieve my data. But now about the yes. I need to encrypt my data because I need to get it back. For instance, I don't know, say credit card numbers. I don't want them stored just plain in my database, but I need them. Currently, they say, and what they say are the big smart researchers around me say that we need to use the advanced encryption standards, AES, for symmetric storage or symmetric encryption. And what I mean by symmetric encryption is that we have one key to create and retrieve to create the cipher and to retrieve the cipher. If it's asymmetric, you will get into the public-private key thing when you send things over the line. That's not what I'm talking about. So we need to use the advanced encryption standard. First of all, I want to say, like, if you can use something else, like say AWS KMS or something like that to do the encryption for you. That is far better than you storing your own keys and hold all of that. But say you're not in that position and you need to do it yourself, use this. Uh, at least a key of 128 bits and a secure mode. But what is that, a secure mode? Well, there are different modes and there are different block ciphers for AES. So in this case, they say, and I say, use at least or use GCM or CCM, and GCM is the my French not that good, Galois counter method, or CCM the counter with CBC MAC. Well, what does it mean? These are authenticated modes, and they have built in something for the integrity, authenticity, and confidentiality of your data. If you use other modes, this might not be the case. Well, I'm not going into the whole encryption thing because that's a study on its own. But let's say we have an application, and we do. And am I encrypting things? Well, it already says here I am using a broken or risky cryptographic algorithm. Let's take a look. Well, what I'm doing here is my algorithm is DES, which is a very outdated thing. And I can now rewrite this to ES, and I already did. Luckily, you see that I have the encryption service AES already written for us. So yeah, let's try this. Let's uncomment whatever I need to uncomment, which is basically everything. Okay, cool. And now instead of, I can basically delete this. I don't need it anymore because DES is deprecated. And my person service now probably needs to, we'll see where it goes wrong. If I just try to do it, probably it blows up and I see where the, encryption service here. And this is the encryption DES service. Let's make it the AES encryption service, right? Let's run it. Okay. Seems like it works, but let's rerun whatever I'm doing and rerun the whole suite to see if I still have vulnerabilities. Because no, don't go into the open source things. Just go into my code. Use broken or risky cryptographic. Oh, I used the wrong cipher. I use CBC instead of, for instance, GCM. So if I change that, and I can change that by including things like, or changing this to, what is it? I think it is GCM / no padding. Okay, that's cool. And now I need to change my IV parameter to a GCM, a specific parameter. I need to include that. Import class, gotcha. And this as well. So you need to do some work and you need to be up to date on that. And at least I'm using the 128-bit key that I just showed you before. And if I rerun my code now or my code scanner now, you will see I don't have a risky or a risky of broken cipher anymore. Nope, it's gone. Nice. I have some other problems, but still. So you see, to be up to date with what kind of encryption algorithms are now good and not, that is something that leans on us as developers, because as developers we probably work in autonomous teams, and if we make decisions, we want to make that autonomous, right? But if you do that autonomously by, I don't know, including a library or including a piece of code like this, make sure that it is safe, because if it's not, people will boss you around. That's one thing, but also they will come back at you if things go wrong. This is also a good use case to say to your manager or something like that, hey, we need to review these kind of things, because nowadays the standards or the best practices say that we need to be aware of that and what kind of algorithm we're using, and we're way outdated. So, hey, don't you want to be secure, big boss? And they probably will say yes, they do want to be secure. Again, wrote pieces on it if you want to read what actually is the case, and what kind of default settings you wanna do. Let's do one more, and then we're going into how we need to start things. Like, who likes YAML? If you do, please send it in the chat, and I will send your name to my big friend Bruno Borges from Microsoft, because he is the advocate against YAML, I guess, in the whole Java world. However, if you use Spring Boot, and in this case, I'm using Spring Boot 2. You already feel me, right? You need to be updating to Spring Boot 3, but I'm using Spring Boot 2. Spring Boot 2 has YAML version 1.x included, and it's basically pinned down in the dependency management part. What happens if you look at the way you can deserialize YAML? It looks something like this. I can just say YAML is new YAML, and I can say YAML load input stream, and it will magically get back to an object. The thing is that within the YAML that is allowed by the YAML parser, by Snake YAML, we can do nasty things. We can do weird things like annotations, some sort of annotations that lean back to files and lead back to classes that might be in your memory or are in your memory, which made it, if you do it like this, made it as easy as this to, in old versions of Java, to call the script engine manager, and still up to, I think it was Java 9. Nashorn was still part of Java, and you could use the script engine and use something where to just load a URL class. Or even worse, you can, if for instance you were using a JDBC stuff from Sun in your ecosystem somewhere, you could load that into memory and use that to do an LDAP attack. And we've seen this before. These LDAP attacks are pretty much the same what hit us with Log4Shell or Log4j. So what means is serialization is unsafe in YAML or in Snake YAML. Well, I trust that everybody reads documentation, because it actually was in the documentation. Note that Snake YAML documentation states it's not safe to call YAML.load with any data received from an untrusted source. And then we need to argue, what is an untrusted source? If I wrote it myself, well, it's still a part of injecting something. If you only use YAML for your application data and to set certain standards, you might not be afraid. But if you use YAML from somewhere outside that is either included by another system or inleaded by a user, I can do all sorts of craziness with that. Let me give you a small example. Obviously, where is my application? Here's my application. I can also export this to YAML. Well, you believe me probably, because we are almost out of time. But I can also import YAML. So this is a good YAML file. And it will say, hey, oh, this is a good YAML file. I'm sorry. And it says, hey, we need to transfer this back to an export order. And it has an ID and order line that. But because my YAML parser, I just implemented what Stack Overflow told me to, it's saying to me, like, just use the YAML.new YAML. I can also connect any other class. In this case, I created this gadget my own, and hopefully you don't have a gadget like this in your system, but you don't know with all the libraries and all the transitive libraries you include. Obviously, for demo purposes, I created my own gadget. Let's see where I can find that gadget. Exception, export domain. Should be obvious. Gadget. Again. And what that gadget does is, when it's loaded, it will call the runnable command as a parameter. So that means that I can upload the normal gadget, but I can also upload this gadget, or I can upload a normal YAML file, or I can upload this YAML file. And this will open my calculator, which is great because I need to calculate things like my expenses. So if I submit this, boom, I will get an error because it cannot be parsed. However, as a side effect, it already opened my calculator. But that means that if there is a deserialization chain available with all the classes you have from all your libraries and all your transitive libraries available in your class path, there might be a way to do that. If you want to know more, I did a full talk on what's the problem with serialization and deserialization in Java. Uh, look that up, and look into that, because it's fun how much damage we can do with the beauty of deserialization in Java. All right, this means we need to update a library, but how? How should I be doing that? Yes, I can scan, and I can in my browser. It says here you have a lot of problems, including the YAML browser. But okay, my scanner can say all sorts of things. Uh, but as you can see, I have over 60 vulnerabilities in my open source. How should I start? First of all, let me get to that. Slides. Do I forget something? Oh yeah, we need to update to SnakeYAML 2, because SnakeYAML 2 does not allow you to do this anymore, only the safe way. But if you update to SnakeYAML 2.x, you probably need to rewrite your code as well, because the API changed. Again, I wrote something on that. So let's not go into sensitive data, because we only have 7 minutes left. But how do we get started? Well, first of all, look at whatever you're using now. Like, I would start with going to my pom.xml and see what kind of, in this case, it's a Spring Boot application, see what kind of Spring Boot I'm using. And I'm using 2.6.0. Well, you see, that's ancient already. We should update the Spring Boot starter parent, or at least the parent thing. And why is that? Because if you look at the Spring Boot start parent, you see that Spring Boot start parent on itself has Spring Boot dependencies. And for instance, you will see that there are tons of properties and set for versions of libraries. But also, this is managed in a dependency management block. So that means that even if you, in this case, SnakeYAML, you bring that in via another library, it comes with Spring as well, but you bring it in via another library. If it is managed by your Spring Boot dependencies, by your Spring Boot parent dependencies, it will set you back to the version that this Spring Boot version wants, unless I specifically override it as a dependency right away, like direct dependency, or put it in my own dependency management file. Be aware of that. So the thing is, update to the newest version, or at least a newer version. And I'm now at a 2 point something version. I should definitely go to 3. But let's say I cannot. I think the current version, the latest version of this is 2.7.18. And that probably already solves a ton of my dependencies, because they are managed by my Spring parent dependency, if you know what I mean. So that is one thing. Always go for the parent and make sure that is updated. Well, we might discuss that we need to update our Java from 17 to 21 or even 22, but let's not get into that. And then look at what kind of problems we have. We still have. Well, we have a ton of vulnerabilities, but then update piece by piece to see what problem gives you what solution. And obviously, I need to rescan here, but I can also look in my, hopefully this works, dashboard. Let's go to projects, and let's see here, don't get burned. And if I do analysis on the POM file, you will see what kind of problems I have. Spring Beans, log4j core, and you can update to the newer version that we're saying here. Like you see here, introduced to starter 2.6.0, fixed in these logging libraries. And you might just need to upgrade here. You need to upgrade to 2.6.2 at the very minimum. So if I do that, it might get that all my transitive Spring Boot starters will get updated as well. So that is one thing. And then you go over all your libraries to see how much you can fix by just updating, and hopefully doesn't break your API. But if you do that in very small amounts, like every week or every other week or maybe every month or so, you see that the delta will get smaller, right? If you do that, if you forget that for half a year, we are probably 2 or 3 major versions already ahead. And if you need to fix something then, because there is a super vulnerable library at that point, you are screwed, because then you probably breaks API. You need to fix a lot of your code. Oh, this is fun. Let's see if I can. Yes, we are back again. Cool. So be aware to update that regularly and make sure that that is ongoing. And then go through your code repository and see what kind of problems I do. I still have some cross-site scripting here. Well, that is easy. I learned cross-site scripting in school, and what I'm doing here is, hey, I have a parameter, and this parameter is basically getting inserted here without any sanitization or validation. So these tools kind of help you. And again, I'm using my tool. There are multiple tools you can use, but tools can help you during development to catch that already early in the stream. You might also want to include these kind of tooling in your CI pipeline and before you go to production, but at least keep also monitoring whatever is in production to see if the dependencies that you have there, or for instance, your Docker containers, are still up to date, or there is a new vulnerability found, because might be okay today, but tomorrow it might be wrong. I can go on and on because I have multiple examples, but I see I got 2 minutes left and I want to give some time for questions. So I keep it at this way. You know now kind of how to get started with this in a Spring Boot application. It's not much different in any other framework. Start with the parent, hopefully. If that's not possible, you can definitely go to your own dependency management and overwrite these kind of things. But I want to leave some time for questions if there is any question that I did not yet answer. So thank you for your attention and hope this was useful.
Hello again, Brian. First of all, thank you for the amazing talk. It was great to see. And to just get back to what you mentioned at the beginning of our talk, yes, I think you're right. It's not just the general mindset of us developers just trying to think of how to break things. And it's interesting to see the many ways of how we can break things. And then, also, as you mentioned, topics like encryption, hashing, whatever, where you could study endlessly, essentially, of what are right choices and whatever. It's just an interesting topic. I don't know. Yes,
I'm happy it's interesting. I saw a lot of things going by in the chat, so at least
yes.
people are engaged. That's good.
Yes, they were. We have 1 minute left for questions, 30 seconds left. I'll try and condense it down to 2 questions.
Right.
First of all, what are the benefits of using Snike comparing to, for example, SonarQube, since that also includes some security analyzation plans?
Honestly, I love SonarQube. SonarQube is great at QA, at quality assurance, and that was their starting point and their bread and butter. Probably my friend Jonathan will say something different because he worked for SonarCube. Sorry, SonarQube, not Sonatype. Sneak is there for security reasons. Sneak security thing is their bread and butter. And the thing is, we can do it in different aspects of your software development lifecycle. In your IDE, with a CLI, connected to your pipeline, all sorts of things, and you can use it in the way you want. You can adapt it, you can integrate it. You can even use an API and integrate all of the things. So I think it's far more flexible, and we're better at security. Security is our bread and butter. We try to do something like a QA. We do some, but we're not that good.
Right. And I guess it also answers the second question. Is it possible to run Sneak on a remote server from IntelliJ, or would Sneak CLI run directly on that server be required? As you just mentioned, very flexible, and you can use it any way you like.
You can use it. I use it on my local machine. You can use it on a server with the CLI. There are multiple ways possible. Even if you need to do that air gap, there are solutions for that. Obviously, the free version is spinning your stuff to our server for analysis and gives you the stuff back.
Right. And that's it already with the questions because we're out of time.
Cool.
But from my side, thank you again, Brian. Awesome talk. And I hope to see you soon again. So far, bye-bye. And
thank you.
Thank you.